It's 6 o'clock in the evening again. Max's gaze was fixed on the northeast corner of the nursery, a muffled warning sound coming out of his throat. This is the third time this week, and the once docile golden retriever is now standing up all over his body, as if he is confronting some invisible enemy. Sarah scolded softly, and Emma in her arms was awakened by the sudden sound and let out an uneasy cry. But Max ignored it, and it never left the corner. The weird thing is that there is nothing but mottled wallpaper. Michael crouched down and stroked Max's back in an attempt to soothe the family's most loyal companion. However, as soon as his hand touched Max's fur, he felt an unusual tremor. On this cold winter night, Max's body temperature was surprisingly high. "Maybe it's time for us to take it to the vet," Michael said, looking at his wife with uncertainty in his voice. "It's so unusual." Sarah put Emma back in the crib and looked thoughtfully at the corner. "But did you notice that it only happens after 6 o'clock in the evening? And, only against this location." 3 months ago, Michael and Sarah moved into the old Victorian house with a vision. As a young teacher couple, being able to buy such a house with a garden in the city center almost exhausted their savings. But for the sake of the newborn Emma, it seemed like a worthwhile choice. Max is a golden retriever they adopted when they were married for 2 years, and is docile, intelligent, and extremely protective of his lord. When Sarah became pregnant, Max stayed by her side. After Emma was born, she became the most competent nanny, lying at the door of the baby room every day, vigilantly guarding the safety of the little master. The house was built in the 1920s, the real estate agent once said, and the original owner was an architect and the materials were very solid. Indeed, the red brick facade, carved wooden staircase, and stained glass windows reveal the elegance of the old house everywhere. In particular, in the corner of the second floor, the morning sunlight shines through the stained glass, dyeing the whole room in fairy tale-like colors. However, with the advent of winter, this century-old mansion has also revealed its other side. In the dead of night, the old house makes a strange noise. In stormy weather, moisture seeps out of the walls. The most disturbing thing is Max's abnormal behavior. Sarah had planned to hire a renovator to refresh the walls, but Max's anomaly caused them to revisit the decision. Perhaps, the old house wants to tell them something. Max, on the other hand, became the first to know the secret. "You know what," Sarah said, hugging Emma and looking out the window at the snowflakes, "I always felt like Max wanted to protect us, and he must have found something." Michael held his wife's hand, but there was a hint of unease in his heart. Perhaps, there are still some hidden secrets in their new home. At first, they thought it was just Max's discomfort with his new environment. Over time, however, the anomaly became more and more regular. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Max would stand guard in the northeast corner of the nursery, making a muffled warning sound, sometimes lasting for an entire hour. "Maybe it's the cat outside." Michael tried to find a plausible explanation. Looking through the window, the bare plane trees were empty, and even the squirrels that used to be active had taken refuge in the cold. Even more bizarrely, Max began to refuse to leave the nursery at night. Even when Sarah brought her favorite dog food, she only took a few quick bites and immediately returned to her post. Those brown eyes were full of anxiety. "I tried to move Emma's crib to the guest room last week," Sarah told Michael, "and guess what?" Max immediately grabbed Emma's little blanket and stubbornly dragged it back to the nursery, as if to say it was safer there. A snowstorm in December took a turn for the worse. The howling north wind whipped the snowflakes against the century-old house, and the window frames let out an overwhelmed moan. Max's reaction was more intense than ever, and he kept running back and forth between the corners and doorways of the nursery, letting out a low growl in his throat like never before. "Sure you're going to wake Emma?" Before Sarah could finish speaking, a loud bang came from the ceiling, like the sound of something breaking. Emma was awakened and burst into tears. Max jumped to his feet, leaning his body between the crib and the northeast corner, grinning in that direction. Michael turned on his flashlight to inspect it, only to see a new crack in the wallpaper, extending from the ceiling to the floor. It's not normal, Sarah's voice trembled, hugging Emma tightly. Look at the wallpaper, it was in good condition before. After several days of snowstorms, the condition of the old house deteriorated. The temperature in the baby's room was inexplicably several degrees lower than in the other rooms, the cracks in the corners of the walls widened silently, and an indescribable smell of dampness filled the air. Most alarmingly, Max began to refuse to eat. This golden retriever, who used to be cheerful and lively, is now glazed and unwilling to do anything except guard the nursery. It seems to be doing its best to convey some kind of warning, but human language cannot comprehend its anxiety. We've got to do something, Michael said to Sarah one night, looking at the sleeping Emma and the curled up on the edge of the bed, and it can't go on like this. Max must have sensed some kind of danger, and we can't turn a blind eye. Sarah nodded, stroking Max's head. Tomorrow I'm going to ask Mrs. Johnson next door, who has lived in this neighborhood for 40 years and may know some history of this house. In the meantime, it's time to take Max for a full checkup. Outside the window, the blizzard was still raging, and the old house let out an ominous whimper in the wind. No one noticed that the crack in the northeast corner of the baby room was silently spreading upwards. Early the next morning, Sarah took Max to the vet hospital. The veterinarian did a detailed examination, but the results were unexpected. Except for a slight dehydration caused by not eating, Max's body was fine. From a medical point of view, it's healthy, the veterinarian pushed his glasses, but the animal's intuition is sometimes much sharper than ours. I've seen similar cases where there is often some kind of potential threat in the environment. Meanwhile, Michael visits Mrs. Johnson. After hearing what happened to them, the kind old lady's face suddenly became solemn. The heavy snowfall of 1963, she recalls, was a severe foundation subsidence in the northeast corner of your house. The owner of the house at the time spent a lot of money on the restoration, but... She stopped talking, and finally said solemnly, "You'd better get a structural engineer to check it out." When engineer Jack arrived with professional equipment, Max reacted violently. It kept scraping the floor in the northeast corner with its claws, as if to direct something. Interesting, Jack frowned, scrutinizing the data from the inspection equipment. There's something unusual about the support structure behind this wall. He banged on the wall, his voice dull and hollow. The examination lasted a full 3 hours. Whenever an alarm sounds, Max responds immediately, as if confirming something. Most disturbingly, as Jack approached the crack, the detector's readings suddenly skyrocketed. "Oh my God," Jack said, his voice shaking, as he stared at the instrument screen, "the structure here is far more deformed than expected." "To put it simply, your house is facing a serious safety hazard," Jack said, presenting the inspection report, "and there is severe structural damage to the load-bearing wall in the northeast corner. Years of groundwater erosion, combined with recent snowstorms, have exacerbated already fragile foundations." He pointed to the 3D model. "Do you see these red areas? This indicates that there is a void inside the wall. If it continues to deteriorate, an entire wall could collapse in the event of a rainstorm or earthquake. The most dangerous thing is," Jack's tone was unusually serious, "the baby's room is right above this position. No wonder your dog has been on the alert, sensing subtle changes in vibrations and sounds." Sarah hugged Emma tightly and shuddered. Michael reflects on Max's behavior these days, and finally understands the truth behind his abnormal behavior. "You have to take action now," Jack said solemnly, "and it's not just about the safety of your house, it's about the lives of your whole family." Max lay on the side of Emma's crib, his relaxed expression for the first time, as if someone had finally understood its warning. Outside the window, the blizzard is gradually subsiding, but the bigger challenge has just begun. "We must evacuate the nursery immediately," Michael decided, "and move to the downstairs room tonight." Sarah quickly packed Emma's essentials, while Max followed her every step of the way, seemingly making sure everyone was evacuated safely. When the last of the baby items was removed, a muffled noise came from the nursery, and the crack in the corner widened a few more. "It came at the right time," Jack said, shaking his head, "and the wall is worse than I thought. I have contacted the professional maintenance team and will be able to start work early tomorrow morning." Mrs. Johnson offered to help. "You can store some bulky items in my garage for the time being. At times like these, we need to help each other." Max finally regained his appetite, and although he still looked at the second floor from time to time, the anxiety in his eyes was noticeably lessened. The repair work lasted a full 3 weeks. Workers had to open the entire wall to discover the extent of the problem. Long-term erosion of groundwater from a dilapidated drainage system, combined with aging houses, had created spiderweb-like cracks in the walls. "To be honest, you're very lucky," said the construction team leader, while guiding the reinforcement operation. "If it weren't for your dog's timely warnings, the consequences would have been really unimaginable." As the repair work progressed, Max's behavior changed significantly. It is no longer obsessed with holding a certain position, but curiously observing the construction process of the workers. Whenever a new support frame is installed, it sniffs carefully and seems to confirm safety. Sarah and Michael see this time as a special period of family adjustment. Although the room is smaller than the baby room, it is more than warm. Emma also seems to have adapted to her new surroundings and slept soundly every day. The neighbors took turns bringing hot soup and snacks, and Mrs. Johnson came every day to help look after Emma. "Our community is one big family," she said gently, "and it's right to help each other in times of need." In the second week of the project, some traces of the house's history were accidentally discovered. Hidden inside the wall is a rusty tin box containing architectural drawings from the 1920s and some old photographs of the original owner. "These materials are so precious," Jack said, looking at the yellow drawings, "that they fully document the original structure of the house, which was very helpful in our restoration work." Finally, by the end of the third week, all the repairs were done. The new load-bearing structure not only solves the safety hazard, but also improves the overall stability. The walls have been repainted, and the nursery has been given a new look, with warm beige replacing the mottled old wallpaper. The most gratifying thing is Max's performance. When Emma's crib was moved back into the room, it scrutinized every nook and cranny before slumping contentedly on the door, smiling at ease that it hadn't seen in a long time. "Looks like our director of security is finally relieved," Michael said, touching Max's head. Sarah wrote in her diary, "Thank God for giving us such a loyal guardian. Spring is just around the corner, and the warm sunlight shines through the newly installed insulated glass throughout the nursery. What was once a worrying northeast corner is now the brightest part of the room. The engineers designed a small bay window here so that Emma could sit and read a book. Max no longer sticks to a certain position, but regains his former lively and cheerful personality. She would play with Emma in the sun and occasionally share her favorite toys with her. Whenever Emma giggled and hugged Max's neck, she always let her little master ravage with a gentle face. "It's hard to believe we went through something horrible 3 months ago," Sarah said one weekend afternoon as she looked at Emma and Max frolicking in the backyard with her coffee. "If it weren't for Max's timely warning, the consequences are really unimaginable." Michael put his arm around his wife's shoulder. "It's not only our pet, it's also the guardian angel of the family." To commemorate the experience, they hung a family photo in the most prominent part of the living room. Max sat majestically in the middle, Emma leaned happily against it, and Sarah and Michael stood on either side smiling. Engraved below the frame is the line, "To our most loyal family member, Max." Mrs. Johnson is right that sometimes animals do have more instincts than humans. Max interprets what true loyalty and protection are in his way, not only protecting the safety of a family, but also proving the bonds between lives that transcend words. In today's nursery, there are no more disturbing sounds, only Emma's sweet laughter and Max's gentle breathing. When night falls, Max gently walks around and then sits contentedly by Emma's bedside, watching over his beloved family to sleep. This is not only a story about a family crisis, but also a testimony of trust, courage and love. As Sarah wrote at the end of her diary, sometimes, the most sincere love comes from a soul that can't speak.